Hello and welcome to practically what is the third part of my ammunition guide. In this part I am just rambling about, which type of ammunition you choose for which tank to get the best results. This is a very rough, overview, so don't take it too serious. But on the other hand, it might have just give you the option to, learn something about maybe exactly the tank you have problems with. Watch and enjoy. I will talk about three tanks for each tank nation. Um, One at low tier, one at mid tier, and one high tier tank. And with those tanks, I will try to cover most of the tanks in the entire tech tree. Let's begin with the Americans and actually the M3 Lee, because it does have two guns. And for the 37, I would use. It really doesn't matter, but I think the upgraded shell is a little bit better against sloped armor in the long term. But there's not too much difference. The main difference is for the 70mm gun. Because the stock shell, while it does having good penetration and it would keep a certain stock amount when you get up to its maximum and you meet some KV1s, you need the penetration because you really do not really have it reliable with the M61 shot. You should research as soon as possible. This shell really increases your killing power a lot. So then let's go on with the M4 A3 E2 76W, and again, well, actually this tank does have one of the best shells already unlocked, which is the APCBC. This is a good shell, but it's at this tier mostly useful from the side. The high explosive shell is not that good. And also this M79 shot you have to research, well, for certain situations, but overall this tank struggles in the first place. The APCR, however, is very interesting. Once you have researched it, take a little bit of that into battle. So, the last tank is the M46 and also the M47 pattern. I struggled a lot with these tanks, and I will give you a little bit of help. Now, the stock gun, is really not that good unless you have researched the heat, and even then, the M46 struggles a lot. The stock shell is terrible. The upgraded shell, the APHE shell, I would definitely use and research and use it a lot, because from the side this shell is actually not that bad. Then you can research two APCR shots. Both are not too good, you know my opinion on APCR, but better than nothing. If you hit an enemy flat, they will do their job. The heat shell, again, well, it's not too bad actually. It's definitely better in terms of penetration to all the two solid shots. But against angled armor, this shell retains a better energy penetration compared to all the APCR shots. With the M47, however, we have a definitely winner. This heat shell really makes this tank worth driving, but again, it's the last upgrade, so it's a long painful way. With those APHE shells, I actually recommend you to try to snipe commander hatches, especially on Russian medium tanks. It can work. It really can work. Killing the entire turret crew, and maybe also let ammunition which still is in the turret detonate. Better than nothing, unless you upgrade to the heat shell. Then we go to Germany, and the first tank I will talk about is the Panzer IV F1, because you also have to research all the good shells. Now, this shell is not too bad from the side at that battle rating, If you have a side shot, use this shell. The HE shell is not too good, and then you have the choice between 2 heat shells, and of course the one with the better penetration values is the best. This makes this tank actually, yeah, not it transforms it from a tank that is in a lot of disadvantages to a tank that, yeah, is annoying for the enemy because the rate of fire is actually high. This is a pattern for the low tier German tanks. Next tank is the Tiger E, and the reason for that is because it actually stands for all Panzer IV from the F2 variant on, and also the Panthers, and in principle also the King Tigers. Now we have the stock shell, which is an APHE shell or APCBC, whatever, and this is actually the only shell I would recommend. But the thing I talked about the Tiger E and not the H1 is because you have an APCR shells. Now in 8B battles again you can face King Tigers, and against those you really need the APCR shell from the front. I really don't see the use for this heat shell, however, because as long as I can see, the APCBC shell does have better penetration and damage values all over the place, and also again the HE shell is of no use. At least I can't see anyone. Then let's go for the 10.5 centimeter Tiger, and it's quite similar, but here this is the first tank where you actually can research a new APHE shell. You can also do it with the Russian tanks, but I will come to this later. Once you have researched the Panzergranate 39, which is a definite upgrade over the Panzergranate, which is actually for me a scale down from the 88, from the long 88, there is absolutely no reason for me to use the stock shell. And I wouldn't hurry to get the Panzergranate 40, which is an APCR shell, because again it hasn't proven itself to be useful at all. I carry 5 shells, but to this day I didn't use them all. This shell on the 10.5 centimeter Tiger is one of the most devastating shells in the game. No need for this crap. So let's go to the next nation, which is the Russians, and there we begin with the T-34E STAT-C. Hope I pronounced it right. And we have a lot of shells you can choose from, and well, you also have a lot of them to research, and I give you a basic idea what to use most. Well, as I mentioned before, there on the first shell there changes, or the first APHE shell that changes the fuse. I would use the second one. Also you get a bit more penetration. This solid shot is not too bad when facing, when you face highly armored targets like the KV-1, unless you get this APCR shell, which does have its place at this tier, but I would just use it when you really need it. I would mostly go with this BR350B with the M8 fuse. There is not a real use for the heat, but it's not too bad either. I guess it's good against sloped armor. The heat or the HE shell is not too useful. Now this is one of the few tanks that actually does have access to a shrapnel shell. This is actually a better shell to use against AAA vehicles, but against tanks, unless you get very weak sides, well, once it penetrates, you have a lot of damaging effect and a lot of shrapnels. But I would basically use this shell for 80%, a few of those until you get this, then you exchange this shell entirely for this. You can play around a bit with the heat shell, but don't promise yourself too much. Basically, this is your killing shell. Then let's go on with the IS-2 mod 1944, and it's a straightforward story. With every shell you get a better shell in terms of penetration power, and I see no reason why you would use those two shells if you can use this shell. This is your main killing shell. How urgent it is to research? Well, this one is already a good shell. This one is a bit better in terms of penetration, but this is my favorite shell in the game for the IS-244. And again, as I told you, you have a pretty good high explosive shell, which you can splash AAA's reliable, lightly armored tanks. You can splash into into other armor sections. That's a story of its own. But you can also shoot beneath the tank, you know, and let this high explosive shell act like, I don't know, a mine or something. Just try a bit around in the test drive and you will see what I'm talking about. The last tank is the T-54 1951, and we again have a few shells to research. Now the stock shell is not too bad, not too good, and the other twos get better and better. This would be my main shell, the BR-412D. It's practically like the shell from the Long 88, just with the same punch, a longer reload, but a bit more damaging effect. I one-shot stuff a lot with it. The APCR shell, it doesn't really show any use at all for me. Then we go to the APDS shell, and that's a really good shell, 300mm. That's basically the stock shell of the M60 and the Leopard, so it's a good alternative. And then we have the heat shell. Now this heat shell I would mostly use in arcade battles when you face other Russian tanks where you really need it, or some rare high tier American tanks like the M103 when it's held down, or the Chieftain. But mostly this shell is good enough, and it's actually you should mostly use this kind of shell. APHE is the way to go in this game. APDS is not just my second favorite shell in the game, but also the second most recommended shell if you face something like a Yak Tiger from the front. You can penetrate the upper casement. Actually pretty reliable with it. And it's a very fast shell as well. The price is really hefty, 1,400 silver lines, but it is as expensive as the heat shell. It does have 80mm more of penetration and acts actually a little bit better against sloped armor, but again the drawbacks of heat, no. So practically for all Russian tanks you are very good with using the best APHE shell, and then there is no use for the first APHE shells. Then let's go for the British nation, and there we actually face a problem. I had quite my difficulties to figure out which tanks I should present you, and I went for the first place with the Cromwell 1, and you see you have a lot of solid shots, no APHE, no APCR, and also no APDS at this tier. For me it turned out that this shot Mark 9, so the APCBC shot, is effectively the best one. It does have the best penetration powers and also works relatively good against sloped armor. The high explosive shell for such low caliber guns is not really worth talking about. For I don't know if you even can splash AAA vehicles reliable with 4mm of penetration. Then we come to two tanks, the Centurion Mark III and the Carnarvon alike. They're basically the same tanks for me, feature the same gun, and there it's pretty obvious, go for the APDS as soon as possible. It just not does have better penetration values all over the stat card, but it also has a bit more shrapnel effect, at least in my experience, and it doesn't bounce as often, and so on. Very good. Again, the high explosive shell, not very useful at all. Then we come to the chieftain, and the reason why I picked the chieftain is because it actually doesn't have any ammunition choice at all. As I said, APDS is my second favorite shell type in the game. This shell on the chieftain is practically for me the best shell in the game for high tier tanks. 400mm of penetration, very good, working against sloped armor, highly sloped armor. It bounces just rarely if you aim correctly, and while I would not recommend to use HESH too often, give it a try. Maybe the update changed it a little bit, but I would use it just against lightly armored vehicles, and my main shell on the chieftain is the APDS shell, without the shadow of a doubt. So, we are actually finished with my part 2 of my ammunition guide. I hope you learned a lot. If not, there is a comment section down below. Don't forget to check out the video description, as there are many links which should further illustrate stuff I talked about. All other stuff like special tanks or rare tanks or tanks that are unusual to play and break maybe the meta of that one nation or break the pattern, whatever, I will cover in future tank reviews in detail. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was useful. Let me know how useful it was, if you missed something, or if this helped you out a lot. Just let me know, it's important for me. So, that's it. Thanks for watching, and see you on the battlefield.